Hello and welcome to The Mental Path. I'm Dr. Gretchen Guevara. I'm a psychiatrist and therapist. I love blending personal growth tools with psychology and medical knowledge to help foster mental well-being for everyone. In this podcast, I'll share insights and skills I use to build resilience to help you think and feel better. You can do so many wonderful things by yourself to nurture your mental health, and I'm excited to help you with that. Remember, there's always room for growth and improvement. Last week, we learned how to notice if the sadness you're feeling is something deeper. We talked about how depression shows up, how to prevent it, and how to take care of yourself if you're experiencing depression. Today, we're diving into a topic that touches many of our lives: burnout. It can impact our health in various ways, even increasing the risk of depression. That's why it's so important to focus on preventing burnout. First, let me ask you this. How are you really doing? Are you feeling overwhelmed? We'll talk about burnout in two sections, starting with the subtle signs that often go unnoticed, and we'll continue on how to address it next week. I enjoy working with incredible high-performing individuals across professions. In my clinic, by the time people seek my support, they're already experiencing significant consequences from burnout, both at work and beyond. Often, they seek support to cope with depression, anxiety, sleep issues, and improve their relationships. We usually uncover that this is related to burnout. Remember, you don't need a diagnosis to learn how to manage this. You can build the skills to cope with these consequences and identify the factors that lead to these challenges. This requires an honest exploration of how you got there in the first place. While teaching at the medical school, I always emphasize the importance of self-care. It's vital for everyone in the medical field, especially since we encourage our patients to prioritize their own well-being. Doctors really need to practice what they preach, and beyond medicine, self-care is important for everyone. Reflecting on my career over the past few years, I've found it increasingly challenging to maintain self-care. Up until last year, it started to seep into my family life. Back then, I directed the psychiatry curriculum for medical students, taught and supervised training physicians, and saw my patients in the clinic. I also worked in the hospital one weekend day a month in the psychiatric unit and had one overnight home call a week. For a doctor, this is still lighter compared to other schedules. Looking back, I realized my quality of life has changed significantly. Years ago, I had even more responsibilities with 1 or 2 full weekend hospital calls a month and back-to-back evening calls, in addition to the weekday grind. And I was involved in 2 or 3 times the number of committees. Yet, back then, I was able to handle it all better. Everything felt in harmony with my home life. I was happier and my family was happier. What changed? In the years before my career shift last year, I became more fatigued despite my efforts to maintain self-care and work-life balance. I felt disconnected from many aspects of my job, really relying heavily on the fulfillment I got from working one-on-one with my patients just to keep me going. No matter how hard I tried to improve efficiency, the demands kept increasing, leading to a sense of helplessness. That's very uncomfortable for me. My career revolves around finding solutions and overcoming challenges. I help people find courage, confidence, pride, and joy every day. I might have convinced myself that I wasn't burnt out. Maybe I didn't want to admit it to my coworkers, husband, or even to myself. I probably thought, that's not me. I'm tough. I can handle hard things. I'm the go-to person when things are hard, complicated, or urgent because I think outside the box and find solutions. I'm not afraid to tackle what others can't. So I knew something was off when I wasn't being myself with my husband and my kids and even at work. Thankfully, I have a habit of reflecting on my weeks and regularly reviewing my goals and values. I finally saw the reality of my situation. According to the World Health Organization definition, burnout is a syndrome resulting from chronic workplace stress that hasn't been successfully managed. It is characterized by 3 dimensions. 1, feelings of energy depletion or exhaustion. 2, increased mental distance from one's job. 3, feelings of negativism or cynicism related to one's job and reduced professional efficiency. Well, let's just say I checked all of these criteria. Once I looked at my experience honestly, without filters, it became increasingly clear that I was burnt out. For someone whose natural tendency and baseline is to perform at a high level, even mundane tasks felt heavier and took too long to complete. Simply put, my heart wasn't fully there anymore because I was burnt out. Hearing my story, when was the last time you reflected on how you're really doing? Are you happy with how you're showing up in your life, at work, in your relationships, how you're showing up for yourself? Burnout has been studied for decades, and your workplace likely has resources to support you if you're burning out. Gosh, I hope it does. It could involve reaching out to your colleagues or advocating for your needs. If your job does not have resources for you, seeking support elsewhere may help you find direction to improve your situation. But first, you have to recognize your situation. We often acknowledge burnout when the consequences are already severe. Your schedule is packed and you feel physically exhausted and stressed. But could you catch it early? Let's discuss the subtle ways burnout shows up and the early signs that are often missed, including the signs that I missed. First, let's explore the subtle physical signs of burnout. Beyond fatigue and exhaustion, you might notice changes in appetite or sleep patterns. Many of us experience stress eating. For example, by mid-afternoon, I would find myself reaching for not just one piece of chocolate, but a handful of Hershey's Kisses. There were mornings when I woke up before my alarm and did not feel fully rested. Other people might struggle with restless dreams. You might also experience headaches, stomach problems, and muscle tension, though it can be challenging to pinpoint what's really causing them. Your neck feels tight, new aches and pains show up, your body just doesn't feel right. Next, how you interact with your environment can also signal early burnout. You may notice more frequent errors even in small tasks. You might take more shortcuts in your responsibilities instead of being thorough or checking your work. This indifference can lead to paying less attention to details. You might notice subtle dip in your interest levels. Finding the energy to attend meetings or go to work can sometimes be challenging, and you may realize you're taking more sick days than before. Other early signs include skipping social activities, leaving early during meetings or get-togethers, or even changing your route or timing to avoid running into people. You might feel disconnected from your coworkers, responsibilities, workplace, or institution, asking yourself, do I really belong here? Now, let's look at the psychological aspects together, focusing on those early subtle shifts in your thinking that might happen when burnout creeps in. Many psychological signs can be quite sneaky. They're often subtle and we might brush them aside. For example, when our thinking changes, it can become easier to get distracted or harder to focus, which can leave us feeling a bit bored, even with a long to-do list needing our attention. Sometimes, you may find yourself feeling a gradual increase in negative emotions. You notice that your excitement or motivation fades a little. You could feel less expressive or assertive during meetings. I experienced something similar over several months before I changed my flow of work last year. It was such a subtle shift that I wouldn't have noticed it without taking the time to reflect intentionally. I'm usually the one who takes the lead in conversations, the one who breaks the ice. It's in my bones to speak up when something needs to be said and everyone else is too afraid to say it. I knew something was off when I began to take a back seat more often. A sense of apathy, an attitude of, oh well, that's just how it is. There's nothing I can do. That became my norm, and this is not how I usually am. These experiences can lead to self-doubt. Your inner self-talk might begin to sound doubtful with questions like, is this really for me? What am I doing here? I'm failing at my responsibilities. I'm not good enough. Your self-esteem and self-confidence may slowly decrease. For many people, A shift in mood can be an early indication of burnout or a result of experiencing various signs of it. You might feel slightly irritable, down, sad, or even more nervous or anxious. Like the physical signs, it can be hard to pinpoint where these new feelings are coming from, making it even more important to pay attention to them. It's common for people to notice these gentle early signs and think, oh, I'm just tired, and then they often overlook them. However, the buildup of these little signs can significantly impact our self confidence, touching every part of our lives. When my confidence takes a hit, I tend to feel a little off. It's not about thinking I have to know it all. Rather, it's about being ready to face challenges and open to trying new things. When I noticed how these feelings were starting to influence my time with my kids and husband, I knew it was time to pause, reflect, and take some meaningful steps. I realized I needed to create a new plan and make thoughtful decisions to improve my decision. Can you relate to any of these? Have you noticed some of these early signs recently? It's important to be gentle with yourself if you notice any signs of burnout. Remember, when burnout is on the horizon, your brain undergoes many changes. First, it becomes harder to regulate emotions. You become more irritable, easily frustrated, snapping at your kids, or feeling impatient while driving. Handling situations becomes more challenging, causing increased anxiety. All the parts of our brains are beautifully interconnected, but sometimes those connections, particularly in the frontal region, can weaken a bit. This might make it more challenging to think logically, stay focused, and manage emotions. When the logical part of your brain isn't fully engaged, you might experience a bit of a foggy feeling, which could impact your memory and problem solving abilities. Burnout can also make it tougher to absorb new information or brainstorm creative ideas during meetings. When stress hormones become out of balance, it can lead to frustrating sleep troubles. It can be challenging to fall asleep and stay asleep, leaving you feeling tired and drained. Your body's energy tends to focus on managing stress, and this can distract you from important practices like self awareness and reflection. These are key aspects of maintaining mental wellness. Your brain and body are simply responding to what's happening around you. Consider these signals as gentle reminders to pause and take a moment for yourself. This way, you can strategize and you can make the necessary changes to prevent burnout and manage stress effectively. Recognizing burnout is essential, and catching it early is even better. So, starting today, I challenge you to spend just 10 minutes checking in to see how you're doing physically, mentally, and how you're interacting with your surroundings. See if you notice any of these early signs of burnout. If you're burnt out, what's next? What do you do? Well, we'll dive into this next week in part 2 of our burnout talk. We'll discuss ways to start addressing burnout and taking care of your mental health. And I hope you'll join me. Thank you for being here, and please share this podcast if you know someone who might need to hear some of these tips. Take care.